Hello, dear friends. Have you ever sat quietly on a calm morning with a warm cup of coffee in your hands and found yourself wondering, why did I fall in love with that person? Why, out of millions of people, did I end up with this one? Or why, despite opening my heart so many times, am I still walking alone? Some call it fate, others call it soul connection. But after more than 40 years of studying Buddhism and over 30 years living in America, listening to the stories of people in their 32nd, 52nd, even 72nd, I've come to call it what it truly is, karma. Now, I know the word karma can sound heavy, even negative. But karma is not a punishment. It's simply the continuation of what we've sown through our thoughts, words, and actions this lifetime and many lifetimes before. At a Dharma talk in New Jersey, a woman in her 62nd once asked me, "Thay, I loved my ex-husband blindly. He didn't love me back, but I stayed for over 30 years. I always thought it was because I was weak. But why couldn't I leave? Where did I go wrong?" I looked at her gently and asked, "Have you ever considered, maybe you weren't weak, maybe you were simply paying off an invisible debt?" She went silent for a long time, and then tears began to fall. We don't come together because of matching horoscopes or lucky stars. We come together because of karmic resonance. And sometimes, love doesn't come to bring us joy. It comes to help us repay, to understand, and eventually, to let go. The Buddha once taught, beings meet because of conditions. They part when the conditions end or when the karma is complete. Have you ever met someone and felt an unexplainable pull, a deep sense of familiarity? That's not just chemistry. It might be a reunion of a story left unfinished from a past life. One time, while teaching at a small temple in California, an elderly couple came to listen. After the talk, the husband said to me, "Thay, we've been married over 50 years, and yet it still feels like we're continuing something we started long ago, as if we were already together before this lifetime." I simply smiled and said, "Maybe the two of you were already holding hands in another life, and this one is just the next chapter." You see, love is a unique kind of karma. It doesn't come from the mind. It rises from the depths of consciousness, where memories of every past embrace, every goodbye, every unspoken word still echo. That's why, when we fall in love, we must also look inward. The person we love doesn't just bring us happiness. They reflect back the parts of ourselves we've forgotten, denied, or need to heal. The one who causes us the most pain often mirrors the wounds we carry deepest. And the one who stirs us the most might be the soul we once owed, an apology, a hug, or a farewell we never got to say. I don't share this to make you afraid of love or to regret old relationships. I share it to remind you, no encounter is meaningless. Some people come to teach us how to love. Some come to teach us how to let go. Some help us see ourselves more clearly. And some come solely to teach us one thing. This time, don't repeat the same mistake. The Buddha never taught us to avoid love. He taught us to be mindful within it. To love not for possession, but for understanding. Not to cling, but to liberate. Many have asked me, "Thay, I've never married. Does that mean I have bad karma?" I smile and shake my head. No, dear one. It means you're learning the lesson of loving yourself. You're learning how to be your own companion, something many married people still struggle with. So if you have someone beside you, be grateful and learn from them. If you're alone, embrace the silence, build your inner merit, and clear the karma that still lingers. Because love doesn't arrive when you need it. It arrives when you're ready for it. And when your heart is steady, your compassion deep, your presence strong, the right person will come. At the right time, in the right way, with the right karma. Let me end with a line I always carry in my own heart. Love is not a reward. It is a path of practice. Everyone who enters your life carries a lesson and a chance for your liberation. I'd like to invite you to sit with me for a quiet moment. Not in a formal Dharma hall, but imagine we're sitting together in a warm kitchen. Just two people with a little life behind us, sharing a conversation from the heart. I'm not here to preach. I simply want to reflect with you on something many of us tend to overlook in marriage or in love, more broadly. It's this: your partner isn't just the person you live with. They are the mirror reflecting you back to yourself. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever lived with someone, maybe even someone you deeply loved, and somehow they hurt you the most? Or maybe they revealed things about yourself that you never dared to face? If you've ever truly loved someone, I believe you'll nod your head. In the Buddhist teachings, there's a beautiful concept called reflected mind. The person in front of us, especially the one closest to us, is often the clearest mirror of what's really going on inside our own heart. After a meditation retreat in Oregon, a woman once shared with me, I realized something today. My husband hasn't changed at all, but my way of seeing him has. I used to think he was cold and careless. Now I see he's just quietly carrying a lot. I used to feel I was always right. Now I see how rigid I've been. I smiled at her gently, because that was the moment the mirror turned from pointing outward to illuminating her own inner shadows. You know, many people become monks not because they're tired of life, but because they've come to understand this very truth. They realize that most of their pain isn't coming from others, but from the way they react, the expectations they hold, and the mental image they refuse to let go of. And nowhere is this more evident than in marriage. A spouse can be the one person close enough to touch the deepest knots in your heart. They may be the one who angers you the most, hurts you the deepest, disappoints you the hardest, but they're also the one who teaches you the most about patience, forgiveness, and even compassion for yourself. I remember once in Houston, an elderly man approached me after a talk. He said, with tears in his eyes, "Thay, my wife passed away 10 years ago, and only now do I see she was the one who taught me how to love. When we lived together, I often thought she was nagging, too anxious, but now I realize those reminders were her way of loving me. I just hadn't yet learned how to receive it." He laughed and cried at the same time, and I understood. Because in this life, we often miss the mirror right in front of us simply because we were looking in the wrong direction. Have you ever felt your partner was too distant? Ever wished they were softer, more attentive, more loving in the way you needed? If so, I understand. We all long to be loved in our own language, but I invite you to try this. Instead of asking why they can't love you better, ask, why do I need this so badly? I'm not saying you should blame yourself. What I'm offering is a chance to look inward. Maybe you need them to listen because there's an old wound in you that was never heard. Maybe your anger isn't really about what they did, but about a fear of abandonment you've carried for years. And your partner? They just happen to touch that tender spot. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha once said, "The mind is like water, only when stirred does it reveal what lies at the bottom." The one closest to you stirs that water, not to harm you, but so you can finally see what's been unsettled all along. Now I know, some relationships are deeply painful. But even if you've left or are living alone now, you can still learn from the imprint they left behind. We often ask, what did they do to me? But rarely ask, what did I learn from this? As a young monk, my teacher once told me, if you want to know the depth of your practice, don't look at how you meditate, look at how you treat the person closest to you. And over the years, I've found that to be true. The person you live with is the most honest exam of your own mind. So if there's someone beside you right now, whether the relationship is peaceful or full of struggle, don't just see them as the other person. See them as a mirror. Often, what we reject in them is something we haven't yet accepted in ourselves. And I know it's not easy, but only when we're willing to look can we begin to see. And only when we truly see can we let go. You don't have to stay in an unhealthy relationship, but you can grow from it. And when the learning is complete, there's no bitterness, no regret, just understanding. Understanding that this person helped you see yourself. Understanding that love isn't just about having someone, but about knowing yourself more deeply. Understanding that your partner was a mirror, and the mirror was never to blame. Think of someone, maybe the first person you ever loved deeply, or the one you once thought you'd spend your whole life with, but didn't. Do you still remember their eyes? Their first smile? And the arguments that slowly pulled you apart? I know, just mentioning them might still stir something in your chest, something unresolved. But let me say this, slowly and gently. No love is ever meaningless, even if it ended in tears. I once met an elderly woman nearly 80 years old at a Zen retreat in Colorado. After my Dharma talk, she came up to me and said, I had a first husband. We were only together for 3 years, and then we divorced. I thought I had forgotten him, but now I realize he taught me something I carried for the rest of my life. How not to lose myself when I love someone. I looked at her white hair, trembling hands, but her voice was steady, like someone bearing witness, and I believed her. Because every person who enters our life, in some way, is a messenger, a teacher, carrying a lesson from our past karma, from the universe, or from the deepest parts of ourselves. Some people come to heal old wounds, with kindness, presence, and a warm enough hug to remind you that goodness still exists in this world. And some arrive like a storm, bringing chaos, heartbreak, and loss, but also forcing you to grow, to stand up again, to learn how to love yourself. Have you ever experienced that? Loving someone so completely. And then when they left, you felt like you lost yourself too? But years later, looking back, you realized it was their leaving that brought you home to yourself. I once asked a middle-aged woman in Los Angeles, right after her exhausting divorce following 20 years of marriage, if you could go back in time, would you still marry him? She was quiet for a moment, then smiled and said, "Yes, because without him, I wouldn't have known how strong I really am, and I wouldn't have learned how to forgive him and myself." You see, sometimes the one who wounds you most is also the one who helps your soul grow the deepest. In the Buddhist teachings, no meeting is ever random. No one walks into our life without carrying a role that helps us see ourselves more clearly, whether it's a lover, a spouse, or even someone who passes through like a breeze. There's a saying I've always cherished. The ones who come are destiny. The ones who leave have repaid their debt. But the lesson they stay, you might still feel regret over an old relationship. But if you look deeply, maybe you'll see that love taught you what you truly need. That betrayal taught you where to draw your boundaries. That silence taught you how to listen to your own inner voice. I remember meditating once with a man in his 60s. He had gone through 3 marriages. After the session, he came to me and said, I used to think I'd failed, but now I see that each of my former wives taught me something about love. The first taught me responsibility, the second patience, and the last taught me that love can't survive without presence. You have to show up for it every single day. I held his hand and said, Then you didn't fail. You learned. And you learned well. You see, even a broken love is still part of your soul's evolution. Not everyone you love will stay, but everyone will leave something behind. And if you can honor both the beauty and the pain, your heart will slowly begin to find peace. The Buddha never said love was wrong. He only taught us to be awake in love, to be grateful for both the ones who made us smile and the ones who made us cry, because each one was a messenger of karma, a letter. And sometimes a letter hurts, but if you read it carefully, you'll find it speaks to something inside you that's waiting to be set free. So if today someone comes to mind, someone who's no longer by your side, I don't wish for you to forget them. I only wish for you to understand what they left behind. Because as I often say to my elder students here in the US, the person who no longer walks beside you may still be walking with you in the shape of a lesson that continues to guide your path. I want to talk to you about something most people don't really like to hear. But eventually, sooner or later, everyone comes to realize it's true. Love doesn't come just because you want it. It comes when you're ready, when you're deserving. Or in the language of Buddhist wisdom, true love is not a product of longing, it's the result of emotional merit. Have you ever heard someone sigh and say, "I've lived kindly, so why is my love life so full of pain?" Or the opposite, how come that person acts so badly and still has someone who loves them wholeheartedly? I've heard this question. I can't even count how many times over the past 30 years of teaching Dharma in America. And each time, I gently reply, merit doesn't show up in surface behavior. It lives in the roots deep within the intentions you've planted, maybe even from lifetimes ago. Let me offer you this image. Love is like a sweet fruit, but to taste that fruit, you must have planted the right seeds. Not just through sweet words, but through how you live, how you think, and how you treat others when no one is watching. In Buddhism, we call this emotional merit. It's the virtue you accumulate from loving the right way, with wisdom, compassion, and no strings attached. No manipulation, no demands, no loving in exchange for something in return. One Buddhist practitioner once shared a deeply personal story with me. She was in her 40s, and she had gone through several unfulfilled relationships. Each time, she gave her whole heart. And each time, she was abandoned. She came to me and asked, "Thay, I love people with everything I have, so why am I still alone?" I looked at her for a long moment and gently asked, "You give them your whole heart, but do you give yourself even a little compassion?" She fell silent. And that right there is the root. Merit doesn't only come from giving. It comes from how you give. Do you give with understanding? With mindfulness? With self-respect? The Buddha said, "When the mind is purified, merit follows like a shadow that never leaves." If you keep loving from fear, from attachment, from a hunger to be validated, then no matter how much you give, what comes back will often be more suffering. I once asked a man who had been single for over 20 years, "If you want to meet someone kind, sincere, and emotionally present, have you been living that way yourself?" He paused, then admitted, "Honestly, no. I've been bitter about my ex-wife. I haven't fully opened my heart. I haven't forgiven." And I told him, "Then what seeds are you planting in the soil of your heart? You can't expect to harvest sweet fruit from a garden still full of thorns and old weeds." You see, the partner you attract doesn't show up because of luck. They appear because your energy matches theirs. Just like two instruments vibrating at the same frequency, they naturally harmonize when brought close. You can't draw in someone emotionally mature if you haven't faced your own wounds. You can't keep someone who loves you fully if deep down you still question your own worth. So if you want healthy love, start by cultivating emotional merit. Be kind, not to be loved, but because you choose to become lovable in the truest sense. Love without expectations. And learn how to let go when someone no longer walks beside you. Once, at a winter retreat in New York, an elderly man, well into his 70s, shared something that left the entire room silent. He said, My wife passed away 15 years ago, but I don't feel alone. Because during our 35 years together, we loved each other with true hearts. That love still lives in every mindful breath I take. That is love born from merit. No clinging, no fear of loss, no erosion by time. I know, these days there's so much talk about manifesting love, vibrational frequency, and the law of attraction. But from a Buddhist perspective, it all boils down to one essential truth. You receive what aligns with your karma and the merit you carry. If you're searching for love, I'm not here to tell you to chase after anyone. I just invite you to turn inward, to reflect on how you're living each day. Are you living with kindness? Are you nourishing a pure heart? Are you learning to forgive the past? If so, then love, in its own way, has already begun to knock at your door. I want to sit down with you and talk about something that many people misunderstand. Marriage isn't a reward for being a good person. It's a spiritual path for those who are brave. I know that might sound strange, because most of us were raised to believe if you live kindly, love with all your heart, and sacrifice enough, then you deserve a happy marriage. But then life happens, and things don't turn out the way we imagined. Have you ever felt that? You gave everything, your patience, your care, your presence, but your partner still didn't understand you. Or you live with someone you love, but every day feels like a challenge, not because love is missing, but because the differences between you are too great. If you've ever been there, I want you to know, you're not wrong. You're simply in the middle of a much deeper journey. The journey of transforming yourself through the relationship. I once gave a Dharma talk at a meditation center in Seattle. After the talk, a man in his 60s came up to me. His voice trembled as he said, "Faye, I've been married for over 35 years, but I've never really felt peace. When we first got married, I thought love would fix everything. But over time, I realized marriage is like a mirror. It reflects my ego back to me every single day." I placed my hand on his shoulder and said gently, "You're right. Marriage is not a prize. It's a practice." And what does that mean? It's the place where you learn patience when the other person doesn't do what you want. It's where you learn compassion when they repeat mistakes that trigger old wounds. It's where you learn to listen, not to argue back, but to understand the pain hiding behind their silence. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha taught, a wise person living with others is like a whetstone sharpening iron. Through friction, both become stronger. It's not romantic, but it's real. Living closely with another human being means you will clash. But if you see those moments as sharpening stones, then every disagreement becomes a moment of spiritual training. You see, many people enter marriage like it's a destination, a place to finally rest. They expect their partner to make them happy. They hope life will become more stable. And when that doesn't happen, they feel disappointed. But what if you saw marriage as a path, not a prize? Then the imperfections, the struggles, the rough edges wouldn't break you. They would shape you. You'd begin to see each day like a meditation, a space where you practice presence, practice compassion, practice emotional strength, There's a couple I know in San Diego who have been together for over 40 years. They're not the picture-perfect couple you see in books or movies. In fact, they fought a lot during their first 10 years, but they chose not to walk away. The wife once told me during a tea meditation, at first I thought I married the wrong person, but later I realized I married the right person to learn the right lessons. He taught me humility and how to stop expecting others to read my mind. And I taught him how to open up, how to say thank you and I'm sorry. I smiled deeply when I heard that, because that's the spirit of a true practitioner in everyday life. Not giving up because your partner isn't perfect, but continuing because you still have space to grow. Are you living in a marriage like that? If you are, I'm not telling you to endure pain or stay in something harmful. I'm simply inviting you to look deeper. What is this relationship here to teach you? And are you learning with resistance or with mindfulness? Sometimes the lesson is to let go. Sometimes it's forgiveness. Sometimes it's ending an old cycle. But often, the deeper lesson is spiritual growth through the person closest to you. The Buddha once said, when your practice is shallow, you believe others are the cause of your suffering. But when your practice deepens, you see that your reactions are the cause. I want you to take that truth into your marriage. Not to blame yourself, but to observe. What are my reactions creating in this relationship? If you're still living with your partner, let each day become a practice. Let mornings be for gratitude. Let afternoons be for patience. Let evenings be for forgiveness. And if you live alone, that's okay too. Because the practice continues. Marriage doesn't have to be with another person. Sometimes it's the sacred union between you and your own heart. Many people in marriage have silently asked themselves a question they rarely say out loud. Why is my marriage so hard? It's not always shouting or fighting. Sometimes it's just the quiet that settles over dinner like a shadow. It's not that love is gone, but the connection feels distant. It's not that you've stopped trying, but the more you try, the further apart you seem to grow. Have you ever felt that? If so, I'd like to invite you to sit down with me just for a moment, because what I'm about to share might help you see your relationship through a new lens with a calmer heart. In the Buddhist teachings, there's a deep truth I often share with those who come to me about marriage. The most painful relationships are often where the deepest karma is rising to be healed. Not to punish you, but to help end a cycle that may have repeated for lifetimes. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I led a retreat for couples who had been married for over 20 years. During one of our sharing circles, a woman in her early 60s spoke gently. I don't know what I did in a past life to deserve this, but in this life, I married a man who's cold, emotionally distant, and has never truly understood me. At first, I thought I was just unlucky. But over time, I began to realize he didn't change. I changed because of him. I asked her, "What have you seen in yourself through this relationship?" She smiled softly and said, "I've learned to listen to myself. I've learned not to expect someone else to fill me up. And most of all, I've learned to love without clinging and give without expecting anything in return. You see, sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who help us grow the most. They stir our anger so we can learn forgiveness. They leave us feeling alone so we can turn inward and find inner fullness. They break our hearts so we stop repeating patterns that have lived in us far longer than we remember." In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said something that has stayed with me for decades. The enemy of today may have once been your beloved. The beloved of today may have once been the one who caused you pain. Karmic bonds are cyclical. The person you married in this life may be someone you once hurt or someone who once hurt you. We don't meet again to suffer. We meet again so we can choose differently. But to do that, you need mindfulness. You need to look beyond surface behaviors and ask, why does this trigger me so deeply? Is this pain really about now, or is it an old wound that's never been healed? I once met an elderly man in his 70s who had been married for over 40 years to a difficult, hot-tempered wife. When I asked, "Why didn't you leave?" he answered calmly, "Because I knew if I left without understanding, I'd have to meet her again in the next life." His words left me speechless, not because he was suffering, but because he understood. He stayed not to change her, but to transform himself. Now, I'm not telling you to stay in a toxic or abusive relationship. If your marriage is damaging your body, your mind, or your dignity, you have every right to walk away. But if your marriage is simply hard, yet still rooted in mutual respect, then I invite you to ask, is this relationship trying to teach me a deeper spiritual lesson? From a Buddhist view, marriage isn't just a worldly choice, it's part of your soul's evolution. Your partner is playing a role in your karmic drama, giving you a chance to write a different ending this time. You can stop the cycle of blame by forgiving. You can end the cycle of attachment by letting go. You can break the cycle of silence by speaking your truth with mindfulness. That's why I often say, the harder the marriage, the deeper the karma, the greater the lesson. It's not failure, it's a doorway. The only question is, are you awake enough to walk through it? Or will you repeat the pattern in another life? Dear friend, I know that when we talk about forgiveness, for many people it feels like we're touching on something sacred, and yet almost impossible. Because forgiveness isn't easy, especially when the wound still aches, especially when the person who caused it never apologized, especially when the memory returns uninvited on a peaceful morning, in an old song, or in the brief glance of a stranger passing by. Have you ever felt that? You thought you had moved on, thought you were okay, but then one familiar word, one familiar setting suddenly, all the pain you tried to bury comes rushing back? I understand, truly. Over the years, I've sat with many people from their 32nd to elders in their 72nd and beyond, listening to stories of what they still couldn't let go. Some were betrayed. Some were abandoned. Some had spent decades silently enduring the coldness of a distant marriage. And almost all of them asked me the same question. How do I forgive, teacher? I often begin with the Buddha's words. Hatred is never ended by hatred. Only by compassion is hatred ended. And then, from my own experience, I gently add, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It simply means choosing not to let the past control your present anymore. You don't have to erase the memory. You don't have to pretend it never happened. You just have to stop dragging it into your future. Once, I guided a meditation retreat for those healing from painful marriages. After one session, an elderly woman came up and embraced me, tears streaming down her face. She said, "Teacher, I've carried the memory of my ex-husband for 30 years, not because I loved him, but because I was angry." And then she sobbed, "I thought I left him long ago, but I never left the pain he gave me." I looked at her and said softly, "You don't need to forget. You just need to let go, not for him, but because you deserve to be free." You see, forgiveness isn't a gift you give to the other person. It's an act of compassion you give to your own heart. When you don't forgive, you're not punishing the one who hurt you. You're punishing yourself. Every day, every night, every time you remember. There's an image I love. Holding on to anger is like clutching a burning coal, hoping the other person gets burned. But the one who gets hurt first is always you. Forgiveness, then, is not weakness. It's strength. It's the awakening of a soul that no longer wants to live in the old room of the past. It's the decision to close one chapter, not to deny it, but to make space for something new to begin. I once met a middle-aged Buddhist practitioner in Minnesota who told me, "Teacher, I kept an old shirt for years. It belonged to someone I once loved. I thought it was a memory, but after 10 years I realized it was a chain. It kept me from opening my heart again, because part of me was still living back there." I asked, "And now?" She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm going to fold it up, meditate with it, then burn it, like a real farewell ritual." I smile too, because sometimes forgiveness needs a symbolic act, something tangible to anchor your heart back in the present. You can write a letter not to send, just to say what was never said. You can meditate and imagine them in front of you, speaking what you've never dared to speak. You can place a flower on an altar, not to remember, but to release. And slowly, something in you will begin to shift. Not because the sadness is gone, but because your heart is no longer trapped in it. The Buddha never told us to forget the past. He simply taught us not to cling to it, because clinging is suffering, and letting go is freedom. So if today you are carrying something or someone you still haven't forgiven, please don't rush. Just breathe with it, look deeply into it, and one day you'll realize it's not them, it's you who deserves to walk free from that pain. Here's a simple question, one that might make you pause for a moment. Are you searching for someone to love you? Or are you learning to love yourself? Because, many of us grow up with the belief that if we're good enough, someone will come along and fill the emptiness in our hearts. And so, the search begins. We search for someone who understands us, cherishes us, accepts us, as if love is a gift someone else has to give us. But after years of listening to people's stories, from those happily married to those quietly alone in their golden years, I've realized something. Love doesn't begin by finding the right person. It begins by becoming the right person in your own life. I remember a woman in her 50s who came to a morning meditation session in Northern California. She had gone through 2 painful divorces. She said to me, "Teacher, I've lived kindly, taking care of my family, been patient, but why does no one stay with me till the end?" I looked at her and gently asked, "Of all the things you've done, how many were truly for yourself, out of self-love, not fear of losing them?" She went silent. Because sometimes we're not really loving, we're afraid of being alone. We're not really giving, we're bargaining. We're not really present, we're seeking validation. And in all that effort, we forget something so important. True love doesn't come from lack, it comes from fullness. The Buddha said, when the mind is at peace, love becomes light, not a chain. If you want someone to love you with honesty, ask yourself, have I been honest with my own emotions? If you hope someone will be patient with your wounds, ask, have I learned to sit with my pain without running away from it? I'm not saying you need to be perfect before you love. No one is perfect. But I truly believe that when you begin to show up fully for yourself, you naturally attract others who know how to do the same. Because energy never lies. You can say, I'm fine, but if you're still craving validation, still holding on to the past, still afraid of being alone, then the people who come into your life will reflect that. An older practitioner once told me, when I was younger, I just wanted someone who understood me. Now I just want to be the kind of person I can sit quietly with without needing to run away. That, to me, is emotional maturity and spiritual growth. Because the one who understands you most isn't someone out there. It's you if you're willing to sit with your fears, honestly. I know living in the West, the noise is constant. Social media, movies, even self-help books often whisper, "You deserve perfect love." And yes, you do. But first, offer that love to yourself. Not by indulging every desire, but by loving yourself with understanding, with responsibility, and with the courage to face your imperfections without judgment. I once told a young person who was heartbroken after a breakup, "You didn't lose them. You just gained a chance to meet yourself again after a long time of forgetting who you were." You see, love doesn't begin in someone else's gaze. Love begins in how you look at yourself each day with compassion. And once you are truly present in your own life, the right person, if they come, won't have to fill your emptiness. They'll simply walk beside you, and you won't need to hold on tightly. You'll just walk together with peace in your heart. I want to say something simple, but perhaps it will touch a very deep place in your heart. You are not at fault for living alone. Loneliness is not a failure. Not being married does not mean you have bad karma. And not everyone is meant to find a soulmate, at least not in the way the world often defines it. I once sat with a Buddhist practitioner in her 60s. She had never married, had no children, and lived alone in a small apartment in San Jose. She looked at me, eyes full of quiet self-doubt, and asked, "Venerable, am I living this way because I carry the karma of loneliness?" I gently held her hand and said, "No, dear. You are not repaying karma. You are learning a lesson that not everyone has the grace to learn. The lesson of becoming your own companion." You see, in Buddhist teachings, karma isn't always a burden. Karma is a teacher. And sometimes, the lesson is learning how to sit in a room with no voices, no conversation, and still not feel empty inside. Some people learn love through marriage. Others learn love through the absence of it. One path is not higher than the other. Each soul learns in its own way. I once led a 3-day retreat specifically for people living alone, those who were single, divorced, or widowed. During a walking meditation, a man in his 50s quietly told me, "Venerable, I used to think living alone was a punishment, but now I see maybe it's a chance to finally clean up the house of my own mind. A house I had let too many others walk through and leave in disarray." I smiled when I heard that, because that's exactly what I want to remind you of today. Maybe you're not missing someone else. Maybe you're missing your full presence with yourself. Have you ever tried dining alone without feeling embarrassed? Have you ever sat in complete silence, no music, no phone, no scrolling, just to listen to your own breath? If not, maybe you haven't truly been with yourself yet. And if you can't sit with yourself in peace, then even if someone comes along, you may still feel lonely in the middle of the relationship. The Buddha once taught, no one can rescue another unless that person has returned to their own inner refuge. The most loving partner isn't the one who makes you forget loneliness, but the one who arrives after you've stopped being afraid of being alone. They don't come to fill your emptiness. They walk beside you on a path you were already walking with strength. Now, I'm not saying you should live alone forever. I'm just saying this. If your current life involves solitude, don't see it as a mistake, a misfortune, or bad karma. Maybe it's a sacred season to return to your body and mind, to heal old wounds, to reconcile with your parents in your heart, to untangle past relationships that were never truly resolved, and most of all, to learn how to love yourself, not in theory, but in daily action. Love yourself by not lowering your worth just because no one else seems to notice it. Love yourself by staying true to your values, even when no one is watching. Love yourself by cooking yourself a nourishing meal cleaning your altar, meditating in the morning, not to prove anything, but because you understand, the one who deserves my care is me. I once asked an elderly woman in Portland who had lived alone for over 30 years, "Do you ever feel sad?" She chuckled, eyes twinkling. Sad, of course, but lonely, number, because I still have me. That answer was one of the most beautiful expressions of a spiritually mature soul I've ever heard. Not a life without sadness, but a life where sadness doesn't devour you. So if you're living alone today, I don't wish for someone to rush in and fill the space. I simply wish for you to fill it with yourself, with your full presence, with gratitude for the life that still gives you sunlight, birdsong, and breath each morning. Because sometimes, your karma isn't to have a marriage, but to learn how to be whole within yourself before walking alongside anyone else. Let's take a deeper look at something important, something most people avoid facing. Love isn't just a feeling. Love is karma. And here's the good news. Karma is not a fixed destiny. It's a living choice made in every moment. You've probably heard the phrase, "You reap what you sow." But the Buddhist teaching goes even deeper. He taught that karma is the habit of the mind, the repeated emotional patterns and reactions that form familiar loops in our lives. And love is where those loops reveal themselves most clearly. I once asked a young practitioner who had just ended his third relationship in 4 years, "Do you notice any similarities between the three?" He paused, then quietly said, "None of them stayed, and all of them made me feel like I wasn't enough." I looked at him and asked, "Then do you think you might be creating the same karmic pattern by entering love with the belief that you aren't worthy?" You see, karma isn't some mysterious punishment from a past life. Karma is how you're living, how you're reacting, how you're seeing yourself right now. Every time you cling in jealousy, you reinforce the karmic thread of attachment. Every time you shut down your heart, you continue the wounds left unhealed. Every time you love without mindfulness, you plant new seeds of suffering. But here's the beautiful part. Every time you forgive, every time you choose understanding over blame, every time you respond with compassion, you rewrite your karma. You're telling the universe, "I choose differently now. I don't want to keep repeating the same cycle." I remember a woman in her 62nd from Colorado who spoke with me after a silent retreat. She said, "I've spent my whole life resenting my ex-husband for leaving me and our child. But yesterday, during meditation, I realized I've never forgiven myself for choosing him in the first place. What I really need to forgive is me." And I told her, the moment you realize that your karma began to shift, dear friend, you can't go back and choose a different person, but you can come back to the present and choose to love differently, starting today. Not love out of fear of losing, not love to fill a void, not love in exchange for approval, but love as an offering, love as presence, love as a conscious act of awakening. The Buddha never said love is wrong. He only taught that if you love without awareness, love becomes bondage. But if you love with mindfulness, love becomes a path to liberation. I once saw an elderly couple, both in their 82nd, holding hands during morning meditation at a retreat center in Oregon. The wife smiled at me and said, "We don't argue about who's right anymore, Venerable. Now we just ask, what did I do today to bring my partner more peace?" That's love transformed beyond karma into blessing. You might be just beginning this path. Maybe you're single. Maybe you're in a difficult relationship. Maybe you're healing from a breakup. But you know what? Right now, you are still creating karma, not through fate, but through every choice you make, every thought, every word, every act. You can choose forgiveness instead of resentment. You can choose calm silence over reaction. You can choose to love again, but with a heart that is healed. If you've been asking, when will my karma in love finally get better? I invite you to ask instead, what kind of karmic seeds am I planting today? In the way I love, the way I live, and the way I see myself? The answer won't come from outside. It will rise gently from within. When you pause, look deeply, and choose differently. Because love is karma. But karma is always a choice you make in the present moment. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this reflection. If you're still exploring love, karma, and the relationships past or present that shape your life, please know you are not alone. We are all just learning how to love again, with more awareness, more compassion, and more truth. The Buddha once said, "No one can save us but ourselves. No one can walk the path for us. But the light is always there." And I truly believe every moment you stop to listen, to feel, to understand yourself a little more is a moment you shorten the path through suffering. If something I shared today resonated with you, even just a small part, I warmly invite you to continue this journey with me on Buddhism Seeds. Here, we don't speak from cold philosophy. We speak from the heart, from experience, from the slow, honest path of learning how to live deeply and love truthfully, just like you. Subscribe to Buddhism Seeds. Like this video. Share it with someone who might need to hear this today. And leave a comment below. I read every one. If the timing is right, we may walk a little further down this road together. Wishing you a mindful day and a heart that loves not from emptiness, but from wholeness. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.